It is 6 o'clock, and I call the October
6:30.
6:30. I call the October 3rd, 2023 regular meeting of Franklin County Planning Commission to order. Before we get into the meeting, I will turn things over to staff to discuss meeting format.
So tonight's meeting will be conducted through a hybrid in-person / online meeting platform. If you wish to comment or need clarification on a public hearing item, please send us an email at planninginquiry@franklincountywa.gov before the public comment period closes. Once public comment period has closed on said item, comments will not be included as part of discussion. To those in attendance, please remember to speak into the microphone when addressing staff or public comment / testimonies.
Will planning staff please call roll and announce whether or not we have a quorum?
Mike Rallis.
Here.
Mike Vincent.
Here.
Layton Lowe.
Here.
Melinda Didier.
Here.
Peter Harpster. Manny Gutierrez.
Here.
Stacy Knifton. Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Will staff in attendance please introduce yourselves?
Derek Broughton, Director of Planning and Building for Franklin County.
Ryan Nelson, Planner 1.
Aaron Gunderson, Planner 2.
Now lead us in Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
To approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I'll second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Lowe and seconded by Commissioner Didier. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the July 11th, 2023 and September 5th, 2023 meetings.
I move to approve July 11th, 2023 and September 5th, 2023 meetings.
I'll second.
By Commissioner Didier and seconded by Commissioner Gutierrez. All in favor?
Aye.
It is now time for the public hearing portion of our meeting. Good evening and welcome. I will turn things briefly over to our staff host who will go over the ground rules for tonight's hearing.
So here are the ground rules for tonight's hybrid meeting. In-person public testimony will be divided two groups, for and against / neutral. They'll be called upon to speak during their allotted in-person public testimony, giving a name for the audio record and position on the proposal. WebEx public testimony will be called upon individually during the WebEx public testimony portion of the hearing, giving their name for the audio record, as well as if they're in favor, neutral, or against the proposal. Please mute audio when not speaking. Email comments received during the public hearing will be read into the record by staff after the WebEx public testimony section of the hearing. All comments and questions shall be addressed to the Planning Commission and should be relevant to the application and not be of personal nature. Each speaker shall have 5 minutes to provide testimony and shall speak into the microphone. Please avoid repetitive comments. If there are a large number of speakers who are part of a group or organization, please select a representative to speak on behalf of the group. Behavior such as clapping, booing, hissing, or remarks is prohibited. Every citizen here tonight should have the opportunity to testify without such distractions.
Are there any questions regarding the public hearing ground rules? Turning for a moment to our commission members, let us keep in mind that we are prohibited by law from communicating with members of the public on this subject matter of these hearings, except in these hearings. We also may not participate in a discussion in which there is an appearance of conflict of interest to the average person. So let us take a minute to consider as to the matters which are before us for hearing today. Whether we had any ex parte communications, whether we have any ownership interest in the properties, whether we have any business dealings with proponents or opponents of the matters, or whether we have any business associates or immediate family who may either be benefited or harmed by a decision in these matters. Are there any commission members who who have a declaration at this time regarding any of the legal items on this agenda?
I have a declaration on the first, on the docket for the comp plan amendments, number 2022-01. I believe I can make an impartial decision as required by RCW 42-36-060. However, it isn't enough to say that my decision is fair. Instead, the standard is to remove even the appearance of unfairness. Given the personal and business relationship I have with the applicant, I cannot meet the appearance of fairness doctrine. Therefore, I am recusing myself from the discussion and vote for this matter. Thank you.
Very well. I have a declaration. I know everyone on the docket today. I know Mr. Overding, I know Mr. Underwood, and I know Mr. Mullen, and I will not recuse myself unless there is a valid objection. Anybody else?
I have a declaration. I know the Underwoods for many years, and also and Mr. Olberding, but I will not recuse myself unless there's a reason for it.
Else? Okay, so let the record show that there was just one declaration from Commissioner Didier for which item?
CPA 2022-01.
Very well. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who would object to any commission member hearing any of the items on the agenda? Let the record show there were no objections. The order of the hearing today shall be as follows. Planning staff shall provide a staff report. The commission may ask questions of staff. The applicant or applicant's representatives' presentation. In-person public testimony for, against, or neutral regarding the project. WebEx public testimony for, against, or neutral regarding the project. Email public testimony for, against, or neutral regarding the project to be read into the record by staff. Final staff comments, clarification of public statements that occurred during the testimony portion of the public hearing. Close the public hearing and planning commission discussion of the proposed action. Are there any procedural questions before we begin the public hearing? Now we have a little clarification of the agenda.
Oh, do you want to do it?
Me?
I can do it.
We will not have a presentation of AHBL. We will
Yeah.
put that off for the future.
On the agenda, it states that there's going to be a workshop regarding the zoning code update presentation. That is being postponed till a future date, hopefully next month. But this was we will be launching into a review and update of the zoning code. We've actually been working on it for quite a while in fits and stops, something like that. And we've got a package together that we're ready to start moving forward. So that's what we will be bringing. Our consultant at AHBL, our planning consultant, they've been doing most of the work on this, and so we will coordinate with them to bring in that presentation and get that taken care of. So,
It's not this.
no, that is not that.
All right, item 1 is a public hearing for the comprehensive plan amendment docket.
Wrong thing. Thank you, Chair. Yes, as mentioned, this is a, oh, you need to
Hold on a
open the
second.
hearing.
What?
You need,
Open the public hearing.
Oh, open.
all right. Okay, as mentioned, this is a 2023 Franklin County Comprehensive Plan docket. On the docket, or proposed for the docket, are two items. I will go over them in order. The first is item 1A, and then once we go through all that, it's up to the planning commission whether they want to do everything at the end and vote on the two items then, or do you want to do them as I present them? Or, I mean, in a day. So, these two items that we're going to go over are going to be presented individually. However, collectively, they make up the docket. The planning commission has the right to approve all, deny all, approve one, or recommend approval, I'm sorry. Whatever the planning commission's recommendation regarding these items is what will be forwarded onto the board. So, but they're not a single item. They are a single item. They're the 2023 docket, but there's two different elements within that docket. A docket could have multiple, 2, 3, 10, whatever. It's this, and the docket represents the one annual change allowed by the county with regard to amendments to the comp plan. You're allowed to make one, you're allowed to take a single action, I guess is a way of putting it. You could have different effects, and it's the docket that we're enacting. The docket, and that's what will be forwarded on. The items in the docket, there's two, but they make up the docket. Does that make sense?
Absolutely not.
Okay. You have the 2023, that's the year we're in. We're allowed to make one amendment to the comp plan, an annual amendment cycle. What happens is we advertise that this is open. We're not obligated to do it, but we did. So we advertise, applicants submitted the proposals to change the docket, the comprehensive plan. The docket represents the entirety of those recommended changes, whether it's one or 100. In this case, in this cycle, in this year, we got two applications. Those applications have already been to the board to move them forward. We hold a hearing for the docket, then that gets forwarded. If the board approves for us to move forward with the processing of the applications, that's what we do. And that's what they did. So off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I'm getting hot. Off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what date we took it to the board. But the long and short is, we took it to the board said move them forward to process them. So we process them. First step is the docket comes to the planning commission for its recommendation. The docket, it's not all or nothing is what I'm trying to say. So this is made up of two items. The planning commission can make recommendations on item 1, item 2. They can recommend approval for one, not the other. They can recommend, you can recommend approval, that's what I'm saying. So my recommendation is after each presentation, we go through that, so you see both of them, then you make your recommendation based on the docket. If you agree with staff's recommendation, then you can use the suggested motion. If the planning commission desires to do a different, like maybe, however they decide to go, you decide to go, you have that option. So it's not an all or nothing kind of a situation. at the end, the docket is what will be forwarded. Well, the docket, all of this is going regardless of what you recommend. It's your recommendation that will be forwarded onto the board.
So our recommendations will be considered individually on
You
each
can make-
application.
The planning commission can make its recommendation on each item.
Yes.
The docket will move forward based on, and with those recommendations. So if the planning commission recommends approval for both, then both will be forwarded that way. One, same thing. None, same thing. That's what we're voting on. But what I want you to understand is it's not an all or nothing. If you're okay with one, and maybe not another one, or however, this is your recommendation, and that's why we're all here, so.
Eric, can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by we make the recommendation for the comprehensive plans change on those two items, or the two that we get? I'm a little lost. You lost me on that.
I guess, what do you mean? You're the recommendation
Right, but
body.
right, but my question is, you said so we, the commission,
The planning commission will make its
makes the
recommendation.
recommendation to change the comprehensive plan only twice?
No. Okay. The comprehensive plan has periodic updates, right? Those are the mandated ones every 10 years, or 8 years, or depends on what year we're talking about. They keep changing it. But anywho, generally, so we are starting I'll get into that later, because it's not relevant and it'll just confuse things. Also, in between those mandated updates, a jurisdiction has an option to make one amendment change. It's a check to make sure that everything, this is a big document, and there's a lot going on, and maybe things get missed, or folks that were interested didn't know about, or whatever the reason. It doesn't really matter the reason why they want to do it. What matters is each year, Franklin County and any other jurisdiction with a comp plan has a right to open that document up and request from the community or the jurisdiction itself. We just don't have any. We're not doing that this year. Can make suggestions or apply to have changes made to the comprehensive plan. Those changes occur either during that update, the mandatory one, or each year we can open it up for folks to apply or request changes. We opened it up, we received 2 applications. Those applications are then taken to the board, and we ask the question, do you want us to proceed with these? In other words, processing, because it takes money, time, staff resources, various other things to move those items. Then the board will say yes, no. In this case, they said yes. These items are moved forward. Then they start going through a standard review process with the hearings and everything else. The 2 items that we see today make up the 2023 docket. The docket are all the changes or all the applications that have been approved by the board to move forward. These are the only 2 we had. There weren't any that were rejected. It's just, but the board has that option. They can say yes to this one, no to that one, and then we would move those that they approve. They approve these. They tell us to move them forward. Those become the docket. That docket equals our 1 amendment. Anything else? You have a look on your face, like you want to ask me something, okay? Okay. So the first item is item 1A, CPA 2022-01. So the year of the application, these are technically, comp plans also have the ability, so these were submitted and processed, and now we're in 2023. So there's various reasons, but this happened, you've seen it with the subdivisions too, where the date doesn't match the actual thing we're doing. That's not right. The applications were submitted in 2022, but they're the 23 docket. Just because that's when we're processing them. Because we had to get the other things done, and there were delays due to the court challenges and various other stuff that interfered with some of these processes. And us just trying to figure out what to do while these items are under judicial, not these items, but items affecting these were under judicial review. So, as stated, it's a request to change approximately 162.3 acres of land from agricultural to rural residential. It's 4 parcels, 114-330-055, 114-330-056, 114-330-058, and 114-330-057. Property is bounded by the city of Pasco to the west and south, and they're currently, that's part of the new UGA expanded up. The city annexed that area, and hence now this area is surrounded on 2 sides by the city. To the east by Clark's Addition, Lammard, and then there's active crop circles to the north. Properties to the north are agricultural zone AB 20, to the west and south with the city of Pasco's low-density residential land use designation, and with a rural residential land use designation zone RR1 to the east. So. This is only 1 parcel.
Well, they divided into 4 after that map was created.
Okay. So it's approximately a quarter section. This is it in relation to, in the county, and this is a blow up of the property. This is Clark's Addition. This is the city of Pasco. These are crop circles. That's, again, the site. What it looks like. Technical agencies, notices to property owners within 1 mile. Public notice was published in the Franklin County Graphic. Sign was posted on the property. Okay, the first 3 items happened on July 20th, 2023. Sign was posted on the property on July 21st. Department of Commerce was notified as part of the 60-day review process. The 60-day review process ended on September 25th, with comments by Commerce received on said date. The 60-day review process can occur simultaneously with our process. It's that the board can't take final action on an item for at least until the Department of Commerce has the 60-day review. It's not relevant in this case, but just as an FYI, sometimes you'll see things running simultaneously. Planning staff reviewed the checklist and issued a determination of non-significance on July 20th, and the Department of Ecology filed the notice under SEPA 202-303-411, and the comments were due on the threshold determination by August 3rd. No SEPA-specific comments or appeal were received. So now we're moving into our staff analysis. RCW 3670A 07505D establishes limited areas of more intense rural development, LAMRDs, and that's how I'm going to be referring to them from now on. I'm not going to say limited area of more rural development over and over again. So it's LAMRDs, which are designated areas where more intensive rural development can occur. Clark's Addition is a Type 1 LAMRD with a Rural Residential Comprehensive Plan land use designation. RCW 3670A 0705 DC4 states that landlords cannot expand beyond a logical outer boundary in order to create new patterns of low-density sprawl. There are 4 conditions counties need to address when establishing or governing LOBs, logical outer boundaries. The need to preserve the character of existing natural neighborhoods and communities, physical boundaries such as bodies of water, streets and highways, and land forms and contours, the prevention of abnormally irregular boundaries, and the ability to provide public facilities and public services in a manner that does not permit low-density sprawl. In reviewing the LOB rules for Lambert, staff made the following determinations. The application meets 2 out of 4 conditions, B and C, due to the establishment of Clark Road as a clear line between the agricultural and residential, along with removing the agricultural barrier between the UGA and Clark's addition. Case for condition A could be made either in support or opposition, depending on how one views the interaction between the UGA and Clark's addition. In other words, argue, yeah. So condition D is why staff is recommending denial of the application. This is due to the purpose section for the rural residential 1 zoning district governing Clark's addition, making multiple references to the zone being low density in nature. One of the policies of the 2018 to 2038 Franklin County Comprehensive Plan, which governs rural residential areas, is to contain the size of the rural residential area without expanding the established LOB. Descriptor for residential further states the LOB for these areas will not expand during the life of this plan. Expansion of the LOB, and I will make clear why we keep talking about the LOB in a little bit. Expansion of LOB would counter countywide planning policy on reducing the inappropriate conversion of undeveloped land into sprawling low-density development. WAC 365-196425-6 ID states the fundamental purpose of the LOB is to minimize and contain the landward. WAC 365-196-425-6 IE does give counties the ability to consider changes in future amendments. However, counties have to use the same criteria originally used to designate boundaries and should avoid adding new developed parcels as infill, especially if doing so would add to the capacity of the landward. City of Pasco's 2022 Transportation System Master Plan calls for 3 road extensions to cover the west, south, and southeast corner edges of the proposed area. Road 52, Road 60, and a future east-west connection, Deseret Drive. There's also a plan to expand Clark Road from 2 to 3 lanes from the intersection of Dent Burns Road to Road 52 North. The City of Pasco's 2022 to 2027 Transportation Improvement Plan only has Road 52 extension listed for the year 2027, line item, expense for design work. Benton Franklin Council of Governments Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Transportation 2045, lists the road extensions for their 2026, 2035 regional project list and the Clark Road expansion for their 2036, 2045 regional project list. No mention in either 2018 to 2038 Franklin County Comprehensive Plan or Franklin County's 2022 to 2027 TIP, which is Transportation Improvement Plan, regarding road extensions or Clark Road expansion. While the proposal potentially meets 3 out of 4 conditions for LOBs as laid out by RCW 3670A07, that one, it does not meet the condition regarding the ability to provide public facilities and public services in a manner that does not permit low-density sprawl. Determination regarding whether lands are designated agricultural lands of long-term commercial significance is still under judicial review. That is an issue. However, it does not affect our ability to recommend the change. It's merely that any action on the ground would have to wait, meaning like if somebody wanted to run out there and build or something like that, they would have to wait until we get the final ruling on the Supreme Court or on the Franklin County, the future-wise appeal of our comp plan. That is still in process. However, so what would happen is if we approve this or we recommend approval and the board approves that, agrees with that recommendation, it'll wait until we get the final word from the courts regarding Franklin soils before they'd be able to start developing on the property. But it wouldn't change. But at the same time, we don't want folks to have to keep waiting on this. So we can get the recommendation and we can get the board's determination on these items. And if the courts haven't finalized it yet, then we would have to wait before anybody could do anything if such applications are approved. State law and comprehensive plan do not provide a process allowing the LOB to be expanded at this time. The next periodic update is due by June 30th, 2026. So, following agencies provided comment: Franklin County Public Works, Franklin PUD, Washington State Department of Commerce, and Franklin County Planning and Building. We received one public comment in opposition to the proposal. All of those items were included in your packets. So staff suggested findings of fact is that the proposal is not in accord with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, including the countywide planning policies. The effect of the proposal on the immediate vicinity will be material detrimental to the land use, that is the basis of the comprehensive plan or the zoning designation. The proposed amendment will not result in probable significant adverse impacts to the transportation network, capital facilities, utilities, parks, and environmental features, which cannot be mitigated, and will not place uncompensated burdens upon existing or planned services. No action item, so these things don't tend to affect those things at this point. Could in the future, but not now. In the case of an amendment to the comprehensive plan land use map, that the subject parcels being designated are not physically suitable for the allowed land uses in the designated nation being requested, including compatibility with existing and planned surrounding land uses and the zoning district locational criteria contained in the comprehensive plan and zoning. The comprehensive plan was approved. It was passed and approved. These areas were designated on the land use map as the county desired them to be. This proposal does not coincide with that approval. The proposed amendment is not consistent with the Gross Management Act and other applicable jurisdictional policies and agreements and or other state or local laws, and the amendment does not, in our opinion, or in our interpretation, advance the public health, safety, or welfare, and nor is it in the best interest of the residents of Franklin County. So, I do have a suggested motion, but I would like answer any questions. Okay, nothing for me?
Not right now.
Okay. So we're now into, does the applicant, or do you want me to go through all of them? I would recommend that if that we allow the applicants to speak on each of their items as opposed to waiting until the end.
Okay. We go ahead.
Well, yeah, you would, remember you were on the meeting, I'm just here giving you information. Yeah, so we're at that point, because I've already asked if you guys had any questions. So,
Item 1A seeks to change the comprehensive plan use designation of approximately 162.3 acres of land from agricultural to rural residential. The land is bound to the east by Clark Addition and to the west and south by the city of Pasco and to the north by Clark Road. Declare the public hearing for CPA 2022-1 to be open at 7:04.
actually, we already opened it at 6:40.
Well, it says to say it now. May we have staff present the staff report, please?
That's what I just did.
Does any commissioner have any questions of staff?
That's what I just asked.
We're catching up.
I got ahead of the curve. I apologize.
Public testimony for, against, for.
No.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Rick Simon. I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. Olberding and the applicant for this comprehensive plan amendment. And Derek, if I could, would you please put up the aerial photo of the site? Because I'd like to refer to that. So,
This one?
yeah, this one will
Okay.
do. Great, thank you very much. So this site, which was designated as agricultural lands, are actually Franklin County soils, not Alltech lands, but, and there's an important distinction there that I'll get to in a moment, is bounded to the west and to the south by Pasco's urban growth area. So even though it's farmed now, within the next 20 years, it's all going to be developed as under their plan as low-density residential land uses. Then you have the Clark's addition to the east, which is an older rural development. And then you've got Clark Road, which forms the northern boundary. Everything north of Clark Road is agricultural land. We have this 162 acres that's surrounded on three sides by residential development. And I get recently, what's not included in your packet is that western 80 acres of this site has been or is being sold to the school district, and the Pasco School District will in the future be putting a middle school and an elementary school on those 80 acres. So now what Mr. Olberding has left is 82 acres on the east half that's completely surrounded by urban, or will be surrounded by urban development, and the Clark's addition to the east. So this application actually makes logical sense in terms of providing a direct east-west regular boundary between agricultural lands to the north and residential lands to the south of Clark Road. Denying Mr. Olberding's request for comp plan amendment leaves him with this orphan parcel of agricultural land that's not feasible in the long term to farm with that level of urban development that will be coming around him. Application of pesticides and herbicides is going to be something that just makes it not practical. Moreover, the site's well suited for residential development that's why the land to the south and to the west was designated as part of Pasco's urban growth boundary for that very reason. It is in close proximity to existing public facilities. You have the future schools that will be located directly west of Mr. Olberding's property, plus the high school that's located just at the southwest, and those facilities will be being built out in the foreseeable future. So one of the things mentioned in the staff report was that approval of this application would create a conflict with existing land uses, and I would propose that if you have residential development in the Clark's addition, you have residential development to the west and south as part of the Pasco urban growth boundary. Residential development on this subject site is not a conflict. That actually it fits well and fits much better than continuing to farm that 80 acres. It is a logical squaring off of that LOB, as pointed out in the staff reports. Is really, I think, more of a fixing that irregular boundary that exists now than creating an expansion of that logical outer boundary. So, growth management has 13 very broad goals, and one of the most important ones is to reduce the conversion of of low-density sprawl, and that's a laudable goal. But there are, 12 other goals, and not every action that a county can take in establishing policies and regulations for itself are going to implement all 13 of those goals. And in this case, I say the housing goal of the comprehensive plan is of greater importance than preserving 80 acres of agricultural land. Hold on just one second. So looking through the county's comprehensive plan, it anticipates that there will be a growth of up to 158,000 people over the 20-year planning period, which expires in the year 2038. Of those 158,000, 13% of those people are estimated to be residing in the unincorporated portions of the county. And at current 3.28 persons per household, there's a need for 2,300 housing units outside of the Pasco urban growth boundary. And the staff report actually goes through and looks at some of the lands to the north of the Pasco urban growth area, out along the Columbia River. I think along pages 49 to 55 of your staff report packets. And it identifies that given the vacant lands out there, there are potential for 1,134 additional units that can be developed in those rural lands, and that's great, but that only takes up about half of what the forecast demand in the county's comprehensive plan is in those rural areas, and that's also considering when the county staff did that analysis, they looked at assuming each of those lots are going to be developed at 1 acre, which is the maximum density that's allowable. Some landowners may choose 5-acre lots, some may choose 10-acre lots. So when you start looking at those numbers, there's a high demand for additional housing units. And so when you look at that in context of the county may be losing 80 acres of ag land, I think that weighs it in favor of the county meeting its housing goals rather than its agricultural lands in terms of, just the percentage decrease in the amount of ag land versus the housing that can be accommodated in that property. Final comment, the State Department of Commerce provided you with the Washington State Court of Appeals decision on this FutureWise appeal, and that decision was that the county actually acted appropriately in designating its agricultural lands, and as Derek pointed out, that still is under appeal all the way up to the Washington State Supreme Court. But I thought it was interesting within that decision, actually reading the paragraph from page 38 of that, where the court said this: "We value FutureWise's devotion to environmental goals. We also recognize, however, the need for housing in a burgeoning community in an era of pandemic homelessness. New housing will support agriculture by accommodating Franklin County's farm workers and workers in Pasco's thriving food processing industry. We expect that FutureWise wishes for any expansion to occur upward rather than outward, and such wish is legitimate, if not important. We also encourage upward expansion, but because of the nature of the Tri-Cities, we expect most expansion to occur outward in the coming decade." So even the Court of Appeals recognizes that housing's in a rapidly growing community is an important goal and needs to be considered by the county. So with that, I would urge the Commission's recommendation for approval of this application. And if I could, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have for me.
I have one just quick question. And maybe help me understand this. You mentioned that potentially there could be in that low-density residential area, about 1,400 homes built. And you also mentioned 1 acre to 5 acre lots. How did you come up with that number of 1,400? Is that an average?
No, I believe if I've interpreted staff's comments correctly, they went through and mapped all of the vacant rural residential lands, and I believe they came up with 1,100. But that was on the basis of 1 acre lots. And what I'm suggesting is not everybody might choose a 1 acre lot, that there might be some that would choose 5 acres or even more. And so that 1,100 represents the maximum number of units. Could be significantly less than that as well.
I believe there's a need for clarification. We did not run a land use analysis on this property. We ran a land use analysis on the other CPA along the shorelines. So that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if maybe you're referencing in a document I'm not sure of, but the staff report that is under the section for the next item on the docket, and that's referring to over on the shoreline area. That is not a countywide analysis. So in that, and we'll get into that in the next presentation, but I think there may be a conflation of things. There's two different items in this packet. There's docket item 1 and docket item 2. If you're referring to the maps with the, I'm sorry, you had said the page earlier.
I believe it starts on 49 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
49 in red, up at the top.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, this analysis is only for the shoreline area. It was not done.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, he was just using it as an example, as a reference of, you've done this part over here in the general area, and it can take this many houses, but it's 23 in the general vicinity. I think were you just not using it as an example? That the part that was studied that you guys did do is only gonna provide half. Am I understanding that right?
Oh, okay.
That's
I
correct.
misunderstood.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I understand now what you're saying.
Yes, thank you.
Does everybody else understand what he's saying? It doesn't matter if I do. Are you
Yeah,
clear?
yeah.
Clear what he was? Okay. Didn't mean to confuse the situation.
All right, thank you.
Any more comments for?
George Dockstetter, Desert Hills Realty, Pasco, Washington. We basically started this process about 5 years ago. And some of you were on the commission back then. First worked with Dave McDonald, and I worked with most of the people in this area, and some of them I worked to get their property taken out of the growth management area. But we did, starting with Dave McDonald, we talked about it, and Clark Road was a natural boundary for the growth boundary. And then they passed it on to Jacob Gonzalez, and he said yes. And so they said Fred could bring his property in. All he had to do was give up air easements to the Port of Pasco, which he did. We were in on the deal, then all of a sudden they decided to pull us out. And we came before this commission when the Urban Growth Boundary Plan was brought before you for a vote, and asked you at that time to put us back in. And we were turned down. We went to the county commissioners and asked to be put back in because we were just a sore thumb sticking in there with potential housing on 3 sides of us. And right now, the sewer lines going in, this property won't be developed tomorrow, but we're asking that we be allowed to, for the zone change, because the sewer line is gonna be connected to these properties that run along Glade. You can see them laying it now for the Dairy Gold plant. And the equipment's in there to run it up, clear across the bottom and all the way up to Clark Road and across over to 68. And we're asking that this be brought back in. The high school's already started. There's gonna be nobody in their right mind that's gonna go out there and spray a field with some sort of crop in it with a high school there. And now we've got the potential for a middle school and a grade school on the west half of this 160. So what we're not asking for that much. And some of you are aware of the problems you have with neighbors out there when the crop dusters come over in the morning. Everybody gets, I know all the crop dusters and they all get phone calls. And they're gonna get more than that when the school district's in there. So anyway, we're back before you again. We applied, I talked to Derek, and he says, George, you can apply after January of 2022, after the plan was done. So we were the first applicants, that's why it's 2201, and it's taken almost 2 years to get to this point to even have a hearing before this panel. And we're asking you to approve this plan. Thank you.
I have a quick question. I
Sure.
want to make sure. So, Mr. Oberdeen has sold this,
We have it, they're in the feasibility period, and you're supposed to close on it the first of the year for a grade school and a middle school. It's in escrow right now.
okay.
More comments in favor?
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Muse. I live at 260 Ridgeview Drive in Pasco, and I am a Columbia Basin Farm Girl original. And Mr. Fred, I'm not going to.
Are
Yes?
you in favor of this?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Just
here to
making
tell
sure.
Fred that I'm in favor of this. And the reason why is because he approached my husband a couple of weeks ago wanting to rent a 160-acre parcel at the corner of Taylor Flats and Birch Road. What Fred doesn't know is that property belongs to me, not my husband. And it was my father and I in our joint venture. And yes, Fred, I would love to work with you, but there's conditions here. I'm very much a conservationist. I like easements, I like open space, I like public access, and if you're willing to work with me on something like that, I'm willing to work with you on putting hay or whatever you wanted to do with that property. So I just wanted, all of you to know that he and I can be compatible here on these issues with some of the other land that he's got coming up for sale too. Thank you.
Any more comment for? Fred?
Well, like I said, or George mentioned earlier, this has been a long process for me because the growth boundary had it included, and then the port of Pasco didn't want that particular piece of ground in the growth boundary because of some long-term expanding the airline or the runway. And I goes, well, if I give you an air easement, will you back off? He says, yeah, the reason we opposed that being in there is because when it is going to go into residential, then every time we would get a call from somebody. I says, well, I'll grant you the easement if you don't have objection for that being in the growth area. Because I think, the best of my knowledge, that 160 plus acres is the only piece of property that is on the south side of Clark Road that's not in the city of Pasco's growth boundary. And anyway, so that's why we're here at the county, because it's just when the school district decides it's time to build a new grade school and a junior high, and because I rent the ground once the sale's complete, I rent it until they start construction. That field there, we used to be owned by my brother and I, and we split our properties. We took kitty corner units, thinking that was the fairest way to do it. But they're going to start construction, residential construction on that piece as soon as the sewer line and water line gets put in. Anyway, it's just been a long battle, and it's been pretty much uphill with the city. So anyway, and I wanted to get up here and speak, so you could, if you wanted to ask me any questions, now's the time.
Questions?
Is this in the city limits or not?
No,
It's just,
We wouldn't be here if it was.
well, I know, but I was just wondering why the city was giving him such a bad time, but, okay.
If I may, a little history. George kind of hit on it, Mr. Dockstader. This was originally, in the first application, part of the original UGA expansion area. When they went back and they did their EIS, the consultants laid out various scenarios. That's what you have to do in an EIS. EIS is environmental impact statement. You have to have a no change alternative, and then various other alternatives. Usually you have at least 3 total alternatives. So originally in that application, it was over 4,000 acres for the UGA. They had to do some work that they didn't do. So that's what triggered the EIS and various other things. So that's part of what created the delay. And at that time, Mr. Olberdine's, all of that was in the UGA. After the EIS, they basically, close to or just over 1,000 acres was removed, and the final application was for, I want to say, 3,400 acres. 33. And this was there were other properties that were cut out, but
So what was the reason for taking that out?
they didn't need the acreage.
So they leave this marooned out in the middle of nowhere?
I can't speak to the city's actions or decisions or anything like that. That's just what happened. The whys or whats, that's within the realm of the city. In fact, they probably have more information on that.
Oh, that's cool, because it
Or at
leaves
least
it in
the
our jurisdiction.
justification for that. So originally it was, and then after they came back, like I said, they knocked out about 1,000 acres, and this was one of the properties that was cut out. Now, why did we not unilaterally include it in the UGA during the 2018, or the last cycle? It's because for us to do that, we have to go through a full-blown land use analysis, and we can't force the jurisdiction to expand its UGA if it doesn't want to. We can if there's circumstances where we can, but this isn't one of them. The UGA expansion is not the county. The city petitions to the county to expand their UGA. We take the application, we take that petition, and we review it. We don't fight with the city and say, you need to include more land. We may tell them you need to take land out, but for us to unilaterally expand the UGA, we would have had to reset quite a bit of our process, because we would have had to go forward. So the city did not desire this property in the UGA. That was the application they submitted, and that's the application we processed. During the adoption period, you know, when it finally got to us and we started moving it, they asked us to include it. But at the time, there's laws and regulations and processes that we have to abide by. As it was, we got challenged on our UGA expansion. Most of that got thrown out, and now we're coming up on that final edge. But it is very rare for a county to tell a city, you're going to, especially when they have the science backing up their position, that they're going to now, well, I know you said this is what you want, but we're going to make you take that. We don't have that authority. We can make changes to our comp plan, but we can't really force the city to expand their UGA. So that's why it was left out at that point.
Right.
Fast forward to today, the big part of the delay was we didn't know what was going on with the properties. We didn't know if they were even eligible for such actions because we got challenged on whether or not they were all tax ag lands of long-term commercial significance. We've never thought they were, and so far, you know, we're at that point where the appeals court has supported our position. However, we're in a holding pattern. But yeah, I mean, I can't speak to why the city did what they did or which properties they picked or didn't pick. That's not our purview. So, kind of where we're at.
Okay.
You know, and just another thing is we are moving into our comp plan next cycle because ours was already 3 years behind. So we lost a lot of time on that. Next year, we have to have it adopted by June 31st, 26, a new 10-year review. When we look at the regulations, we feel that that's the more appropriate time for these applications. Because this requires us, you know, that's why our recommendation is what it is, and because of the citations of law that we cited. So it is not that staff necessarily disagrees or agrees with this proposal. It's a matter of the law and where it places in relation to that. And sometimes now is not the time, but tomorrow may be. And
Been getting told that for 5 years.
I appreciate that, and I can't speak to that because I wasn't here telling them that for 5 years. I mean, I've been here for 5 years, but all this stuff was done beforehand.
But you represent those people now, so.
Right. And I have to follow the law.
Right.
My job is to interpret the law and provide that recommendation. What happens after that is what happens after that, but that's my job. According to our review of the law and the application and the intent of the application and all the stuff we have in our information and in our documentation, we made our recommendation because it doesn't meet those things. Doesn't mean that tomorrow or during our full-blown update, this might not be, I don't know. We'd have to discuss that at the time. But our recommendation is what we have because, well, it's laid out in the staff report. So that's the reason why we make our recommendation. It's not about whether we think this is a good idea, a bad idea.
But the law says we can apply for a zone change. It doesn't deny us.
I was gonna say, what's the point of having a docket where we can do one change a year if the law says we can't?
It depends on the application and what they're asking for.
Okay?
I can't speak to that.
Just asking.
Well, no, what I'm saying is each application is going to be different. And that's what the docket process is for. It's not it's if the proposal meets the requirements of law, staff will recommend approval. If in their interpretation it does not meet the requirements of law, we make our recommendation based on that.
And so in the part of the law that they don't meet is what?
In your staff report, but,
Yeah, but that's pretty thick, that staff report.
these are
Condition D.
complicated items, and yeah, the staff reports are gonna be fat on some of these because of the analysis.
So condition D is why, is why staff is recommending denial. So go back to D. So the ability.
All four conditions must be met.
Right. So, but you specifically said that condition D is why you guys recommended a denial, correct?
Yes, because this proposal can be interpreted and doesn't, we're talking about, first of all, sewer line goes in, right?
The what?
They're talking about a sewer line going up there.
Right.
You can't extend sewer unless they change, except for schools, outside of the UGA. Our action is not to include, this is not a request to include this in the UGA. This is a request to change it, the county zoning to allow for RR1 or equivalent, something similar to that, development right next to a Lambert that is also 1 acre development. So you'll notice that our Lamberts don't tend to sit border to border. There's space between them. This will effectively expand that Lambert. Whether you call it a different name or not, Clark's addition will go from, that west border will now be 1 acre lots for 4. Now, we didn't know about the half the property being sold. So technically, that starts getting even more interesting. But it doesn't change anything because, one, the sale has not occurred, and two, this was what the application's for, so this is what we're processing it as. If they want to withdraw it at this time because of the new situation and present new information and a new design idea, that can be done. But based on the information we had at the time, just,
Does the school being built kitty corner to it affect that?
when it gets built, it could.
Where are they building the brand new school right now?
They're building a kitty corner.
It's to the southeast,
That's what I mean.
Southwest.
west, yeah.
It's in the,
Yeah,
back on that map, they're building
Yeah,
on the
I'm-
east
I'm
half of
heading
that
back.
corner.
right down there by the blue.
So this is the current high school where
Right.
they've been messing around doing dirt. I think that's where they've been doing dirt work for, it seems like forever.
About 7 months now.
Well, yeah, and they were running that, the water line and the sewer lines down Burns to, again, in preparation for this and for Spencer's and other development along to the south end.
For they're in preparation for every
So
parcel around it except this one.
And then, based on what they were saying, that it's gonna run up here and then shoot that way.
2 lines, one in the middle and one on Clark Road.
So, like I said, I'm not saying staff agrees or disagrees, figures this is a good idea or not. It's a matter of what's proposed at the time, the laws that are in place at the time. That's what our recommendation is based on. And maybe but this type of activity, for example, the potential expansion of the LOB, here, this line, moving it this way, that's effectively an expansion of the LOB.
Couldn't it be said to the same thing to the south? If somebody wanted to do something there?
This is in the city. I have no
No,
jurisdictional
the-
authority.
The other one right below it, the dirt one.
This one,
Yeah.
That's in the city too.
that's all in the city. Everything in this black line is in the city. We're out here.
Okay.
I was under the understanding, if it wasn't in our decision-making ability or legal that you would weed these applications out before they got to the board? Why is it here now?
Because the board told me to put it here.
What board?
The Board of County Commissioners told me to forward this on. They were provided with our recommendation. They told us to move it forward.
We're getting a negative tone from you that this
Sorry.
is illegal. If it's
I'm-
illegal,
I'm-
we can't vote on it, why are
I-
we here? Can we vote on this or not?
Yes. You can make whatever recommendation you want to.
Just the recommendation is what we can
Of
vote on,
course,
that's
but
it, yeah.
it's here,
Right.
The laws,
the other things that come to the county meet criteria. If they don't meet the criteria, Derek does not bring them to us because he weeds them out.
Right.
I get the feeling that this is supposed to be weeded out, but it's in front of us. So we can vote for this.
you can
and
vote
forward.
however you want.
Okay, that clears it up.
Yeah.
Is there any more comment in favor? Or any more questions for Mr. Oberding?
I guess my last question, and Derek and Mr. Oberdeen, on that D, on the meeting the requirements and conditions, with that facility and the facilities potentially being built, does that flip side that to being a requirement and a condition for potential approval on that D item, meeting all four requirements? Or is it still going to leave that three requirements
They
met
have
and that
to
fourth
meet
one
all-
not?
According to the laws, they're supposed to meet all four conditions.
Who is they?
The applicant. The
Gotcha.
proposal needs to meet all four conditions.
Okay.
There's differences too in this process when compared to the mandated reviews. On the mandated reviews, we have to go through a whole lot of studies. And in those studies, we do an analysis to determine if there's a need, what's the growth patterns, basically it's called a land use analysis. Some jurisdictions do buildable land stuff, but we don't get into that. We might in a later date, because buildable lands, what that is yeah, you got acreage, but can you actually build on it? You know, if you got a 40-acre property that's just a bunch of ravines and this and that, and you've only got 10 acres over here that's actually buildable, in a buildable lands scenario, you would take those things into account, but we're not that technical at this point. So it's a comp plan amendment. I mean, an applicant, in my opinion, always believes that they're right. I mean, the idea is they wouldn't go through the hassle if they didn't believe that what they're proposing is correct. But at the same time, it doesn't mean it always is. The process with comp plans is I don't have the right to deny a person's due process. All I am is effectively a technocrat. I read the laws, I look at the application, we make our recommendation based on that. The planning commission and the board makes the final decision. When I go to the board, I don't take my recommendation. I take the planning commission's recommendation. And then I represent that position. Except for on rare occasions when staff will have a different recommendation than the planning commission. And I think that's happened once or twice since I've been here. So, but it's rare. And in these types of situations, these are policy matters. So staff is not going to get, I'm going to review the application, I'm going to look at the law, I'm going to give it over to you guys to make your recommendation, which will then be taken to the board for its decision. As opposed to quasi-judicial actions or things like that where it's prescriptive or it's by law, you know, subdivisions, those I have the right to kill before they get here if they're not meeting the requirements. These are different items. I don't have a right, regardless of what my opinion is, to stop the due process of an application from moving forward through all the steps. I believe that's the intention of the initial hearing where I take it to the board initially. When I say board, I mean, when I say board, I'm almost always talking about the Board of County Commissioners. I will always say if it's a different board. When I go before the board looked at the docket, they said to process it. So we process it, and this is where we are. It's gone through the process. Or, I mean, it's going through the
They
process.
said to move it forward just to formally deny it?
I can't speak to the, they didn't say
That's a
that.
positive motion on this.
Yes, we can.
You can vote whatever you want.
Let's move on. Are there any more questions? No.
Thank you.
Anybody else in favor of? Any comments against or neutral? Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name's Steve Davenport. I'm with the Washington Department of Commerce Growth Management Services. And a little background on me, I'm a lifetime resident of Eastern Washington. Currently live in Spokane. And before I was in Commerce, I worked about 25 years at Spokane County, managing their long-range operations. So before I get started, I've got Aaron was going to help me put up a slide on the screen there.
Is that the PDF?
Yeah, that's the PDF.
There's 2 pages on that too. But what I'm going
This
to put
one?
here, I'm going to give you in paper
This?
as well
Oh,
and submit for the record. This one will
Yeah,
be for the
yeah,
record.
that's that one.
yeah, but how did, it don't show up there?
Yeah, I don't,
Because it's a PDF.
that's strange, okay.
Why would, it's not a power, all right, let me.
Oh, you probably have to disengage the, yeah, so you gotta, so go back to the CPA.
I have to close it out?
No, what I think you have to exit presenter mode. Sorry. Well, oh, okay. I guess it. Okay, cool.
That is what does it.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so what I would like to do with my presentation is both of these items that you are listening to today have pretty much the same issues. And so I'm going to address both of the comprehensive plan amendments so I don't have to get up here and repeat us and make the meeting last longer than it is. So my comments would apply to both 01 and 02. So the Washington State Department of Commerce, we recommend denial of CPA 2022-01 and 2022-02. These proposals are not consistent and would violate the requirements of the Washington Growth Management Act. So both of these proposals consider creation of new limited areas of more intense rural development. I'm going to discuss both of these proposed changes and how they relate to the growth management. So I'm going to discuss limited areas, more intense development, and the agricultural issue, ag land issue. So limited areas of more intense rural development. I'd like to provide a little bit of history and background on that. When the Growth Management Act got adopted, they adopted 12 goals, and I think it's up to 15 now. They keep adding them. And one of them was, number 2, was reduce sprawl. That was a huge emphasis with the state legislators at that time. And it also said reduce the inappropriate conversion of undeveloped land into sprawling low-density development. So how do we do that? There's 2 ways we can do it. One is urban growth areas. Everything inside that boundary is urban. If you're outside, you're rural. That means you're looking at 5-acre to 10-acre or more lots. So that prevents sprawl. Let's see here. So they came up, they had an issue when they did that with these small communities out in the rural area. You know, cross street, little communities or just isolated communities, because they weren't cities, they didn't have UGAs. And so they came up with this idea of LAMRIDs, local areas of more intense rural development. So these LAMRIDs are intended to allow the area to be recognized, but not to allow them to expand, which would allow for creeping urbanization in rural areas, because the LAMRIDs have urban-sized lots. One of the reasons they did it because if you apply the development standards that we have for 5-acre lots and 10-acre lots, they don't work on these smaller lots. So say you had a lot coverage in the 10 acres on this, you couldn't go over 20% of your lot with a building size. That wouldn't work on a half-acre lot or a quarter-acre lot. So they needed their own development standards. So that was one of the reasons they created these. And the idea was draw a line around it and contain those areas, but allow them to have what they needed to develop.
Say no, Steve, the text isn't being included. Do you want?
Oh, that's okay. I gave them a copy, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So I've got an example of a LAMRID on the screen here. So you got a pointer there? Does that work? So I just grabbed this real quick. It's not in Franklin County. I apologize for that. But this is in Spokane County. It's an example that I had. And so let me show you. So this is up north of Spokane, and it's at the intersection of Chattaroy and Highway 2. So Highway 2 goes up north towards Canada. And this area, it has a manufactured home park, which we had a lot of those happen in our rural areas in the 60s and 70s. And it was one of the reasons that the county started zoning, because they were having so many problems with those. So we have a manufactured home park, and I think it has its community drain field is up in here. Then there's these little subdivisions, and there is a elementary school. So this is the LAMRID, this is the boundary. And what the legislation says is you want to draw a tight boundary around these LAMRIDs to contain them, because if you just let them grow and grow and grow, then you've got sprawl, and you end up with all kinds of traffic problems and things like that. So that's a concept with the containing those with a logical outer boundary. So the statute addressing LAMRIDs, it has two basic requirements. As I said, recognize the area as it existed at the time the county began planning under GMA, and that was 1995 for Franklin County. So any of these areas that were there on the ground and built prior to 1995, you can recognize those as LAMRIDs and give them their own development standards. Because a lot of times, like in this one, well, it was up there, but you can see there's vacant property inside there. So there's, a lot of these lots are not built upon yet. So it can include vacant property, but the idea is to draw a tight boundary around it. Allow infill, but don't allow growth outside of that. And they're not expected to be expanded from their existing boundary. So these proposals do not meet the requirements to be considered a LAMRID. And as Derek was saying, this would be an expansion of an existing LAMRID, which according to the GMA is not allowed. So that's one of the issues that you run into with these. So that's pretty much the LAMRIDs. You can't just make a LAMRID with vacant land out in the rural area. That's not the intent of the legislation. The intent was to recognize these areas, put a boundary around them, then you're good. and they're not expected to expand. And on your sheet there, I won't read through all that. It talks about the legislation a little bit and what is expected. And in our letter that we submitted, should be part of your package, there's a lot of detailed information on the RCWs and the administrative code on limited developments of more intense rural development. Derek, could you flip up to the next one? So that's just kind of a nutshell on what limited areas of more intense development was intended to be, and that's what the legislature wanted. So it's very difficult to expand these or create new ones on vacant land. So let's talk about agricultural lands of long-term significance. Now, CPA 2201, as Derek was said, and I've known Derek a long time because he worked in the Spokane area. So, ag lands of long-term significance, the legislature also had a goal to preserve those areas and protect those areas of really significant agriculture. That's why you can have agricultural lands that are not long-term significance, hayland or whatever. But if it's high-functioning agricultural land, then it can receive this category, and it gets extra protection. So, what the Growth Management Act says when it's talking about these lands, well, let me go back, because this one is under litigation right now. So, depending on what happens there, if the Supreme Court overturns the appeals court, you would have to consider it as a agricultural land of long-term significance. So just keep that in mind.
Is it considered long-term significance right now?
The appeals court said no.
No, so this parcel right now, is it agricultural land of long-term significance?
Well,
Yes or no?
no, it isn't.
It's
According to
Franklin Crops.
the appeals court.
It's
Now,
Franklin Crops.
It's Franklin
Soils.
Crops. If the state Supreme Court came in and said, appeals court, you're wrong, this is a long-term significant
Right, but
parcel,
as it stands today, it's.
then it would have to comply with the requirements that go along with that. So
Talking about the 4 requirements.
the requirements for de-designating and designating those lands. And I'll go through that a little bit here, just really quickly. So there are two WACs that kind of address how these are designated or de-designated. And WAC 365-190-040, I'm going to quote 2 parts of that. The first one, in classifying, designating, and de-designating natural resource lands, counties must conduct a comprehensive countywide analysis. So if you're going to change any of your resource lands of long-term significance, you have to look at the whole county in a comprehensive approach.
Right, but didn't you just say this isn't of long-term significance?
Well, it may be if the Supreme Court says it is.
If we can't use the school being built because the deal's not done yet, we can't use that because it's not. done
Right,
yet
so
either.
this
So you
is
can't
maybe
have
not
both.
ripe, this is maybe not ripe to be heard right now, because there's that issue that's hanging over your head. You don't know, the litigation's not complete, you don't know if it's gonna be
Right.
long-term significance, or just an agricultural zone. Now, if it's just an agricultural zone, you can put a school in there, there's provisions for that.
Right.
But if it's long-term significance ag, you can't put a school in there. So that's something to
As
keep in mind,
today, it's not long-term significant ag.
according to the appeals
Well,
court.
that speaks to the timing of the application then. That's what we're talking about. As far as maybe 2 years, it may be more appropriate for
Yeah,
a particular application,
yeah.
depending on this litigation.
Yeah, but they already
Yeah.
went through that. They were part of the urban growth. City said, yeah, we're gonna take you in. At the last minute changed it, so they got bumped out of it. So how much longer do they have to wait?
No, I'm just saying it,
Anyway, I
Long-term
didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, no, that's fine. Interrupt me anytime. So the other citation I'd like to make, which is also in the WAC, it says site-specific proposals to de-designate, take the designation away, and this would apply to O2 for sure, and possibly O1. Site-specific proposals to de-designate natural resource lands must be deferred until a comprehensive countywide analysis is conducted. So that definitely applies to O2. It may or may not apply to O1.
It's our 8 o'clock.
Oh, it's the 8 o'clock shutdown.
Yeah.
But we got to quit.
No, it's for some reason our systems do something weird at 8 o'clock. And then it flips on and nobody's been able to figure out why.
Sounds like a ghost or
I
something.
I think we have audio, but we lose video. Is that what it is?
Yeah, let me see if I can get the.
Oh, there he goes.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
Or did it go down?
Oh, it crashed, huh?
Crash.
oh
I saw the
no.
camera move.
Well, that's okay. I can continue without it. It's
I have a
fine.
question for you.
Yes, sir.
As it relates to this Lambert on here,
Yeah.
okay, is the zoning consistently the same throughout the interior of these Lamberts?
Yeah, on that example, if you're inside that boundary, you're going to have urban zoning. So you can have lots down to, 4 lots an acre. Usually we just take the single-family zone inside the boundary and apply it to these. So,
So
you know,
what is that zoning? Is it RR1 or, because you have this mobile home park?
yeah, well, in this county, RR1 would be a Lamred.
It'd be R1 up in,
But would that RR1
R1 in
hold true
Spokane.
throughout the interior of this Lambert?
Well, if this was designated in a Lamred, the agricultural zoning, you're only going to be able to break it up, I don't know, what is it, 20 acres or 10 acres?
Under currently, they're limited to 20 acre minimum.
20 acres. So right now, you could divide it 1 lot per 20 acres. If it's in a Lamred, you could go down